How much freedom are we willing to give up in order to have security? Are we willing to wait in line in airport security for hours and hours to make sure that all the bags are checked and rechecked to make sure that the flight is safe? Are we willing to go through strip searches? Are we willing to be asked any number of questions about our past by border security, airport security, etc.? Are we willing to have our emails read? Are we willing to have our cell phone conversations listened in on? Are we willing to do all of these things in the name of security? Are Canadian lives worth more than the lives of people in other countries? Should Canadian soldiers be sacrificed in order to make sure that these Afghan girls aren't harmed when they try to go to school in Afghanistan? The Taliban has threatened and has killed Afghani girls and harmed them in other ways to make sure that they don't go to school. These girls, in the next 10 years or so, if the Taliban takes over, will have to wear full burqas again. Is that fair to them? Should Canadian soldiers go back there to help protect them? These are tough questions to ask. Are Canadian lives more important than other people in other countries? This picture on the left is of the dying body of Nathan Cirillo, the corporal who was shot in front of the Canadian War Memorial. And the picture on the right is a French or a Parisian police officer that was killed just recently in the magazine attack in Paris, France. Just because he's Canadian? I'm assuming many of us would feel as though that his life is somewhat more, or maybe slightly more important than the officer that was killed in Paris that day. Can we change countries like Afghanistan? Does Canada and other countries in the West have a responsibility or the right to tell other countries what they should do and how they should do it? And can we make them more like us? Can countries do that? Are countries like Afghanistan fixable? Are they so flawed that anything we do, or even if we sacrifice another 158 Canadian soldiers and thousands of American soldiers, is it worth it? Can it be changed? Just waiting for this video to load up. Can we trust military and governments to operate without mistakes? Can we have a government or a military actually follow through on what it's supposed to do? The rule of law is supposed to protect us in a lot of situations, but sometimes they get it wrong. The United States got it wrong in Iraq. The United States got it wrong with weapons of mass destruction and all of those things. Can we trust the military to do that kind of thing? A lot of people think that they can't. Who's more harmful in this situation? Michael Zehaf-Bibeau, the killer of Nathan Cirillo and the shooter in Ottawa? Or is it Justin Bork, who was the killer of the 4 RCMP officers in Moncton? Who is more scary to you? Who is more harmful in the war on terror? Are they both terrorists? Are they equally terrorists?
I didn't kill my wife. I don't care.
Governments, soldiers, police officers, border guards, they're also just doing their job and following orders as well. One last thought I'll give you before we end this slideshow. Guantanamo Bay is an area in Cuba in which the United States has a naval base. So it's not technically in the United States. It's a naval base operated by the United States Navy that happens to be in Cuba. Once they invaded Afghanistan, they took a lot of Taliban and Al-Qaeda members prisoner. and they would a lot of times they were in solitary confinement, and they would have to go through any varieties of isolation torture or any other kind of physical harm. The picture down below is what we can presume to be an Al Qaeda or Taliban member. He has headphones on, he has goggles on, he has a orange jumpsuit, and we can assume that because it's Cuba and it looks like it's very bright out, that it is really hot that day. One such person that is was in that prison was a Canadian citizen. His name was Omar Khadr. And in 2001, he was 15 or 16 years old. He had traveled there with his father. His father was Afghani, and he was either part of the Taliban or Al Qaeda or whatever it was. He brought his son with him. So fighting with his father against the American invaders, it is alleged that Omar Khadr, who was 15 or 16 at the time, who was fighting against American soldiers, threw a grenade at an American soldier, and the American soldier died as a result of the grenade explosion. Omar Khadr was then soon after captured by the Americans and put into jail. He was put in jail at an American Air Force base in Afghanistan called Bagram Air Force Base. And there he was in prison for a while. Then he was transferred to Guantanamo Bay when he was 16 without trial. So that was in 2001. And he was there for a long time, and he's 16 years old. An argument can be made that he was just a soldier on the battlefield, and if you kill another soldier on the battlefield, you're not doing anything wrong, you're just following orders. But do those rules apply to terrorists? A lot of people would say no. Some people say that because he was 16, he couldn't make a decision anyways, and he should be released, but he wasn't. And he was in Guantanamo Bay in Cuba up until 2 years ago. He was transferred from Cuba to a penitentiary in Kingston. Then he went to another one just outside of Kingston, and now he is in Alberta. He's in a prison just outside of Calgary. It's somewhat of a minimum security prison, but this prison will give him the chance for parole. So Omar Khadr is on the path, despite not being free, to being reintroduced into Canadian society. So these are some big legal questions that we have to ask. We talk about whether or not we would sacrifice personal freedom for security. So for security purposes, the United States and Canada has had this guy locked up for years, but his freedom was definitely taken away. So because his freedom was taken away, ours can be taken away as well. So these are some questions that need to be asked and analyzed, not only for contemporary issues, but you can look back and see very similar ones all across history.